These are my impossible beaded tassel earrings. They look intricate, right? But I call them impossible for a very different reason. It's not because they're hard to make, they're actually super simple. The impossible part was the drama of finding beads that matched. In this episode, I'll share my improved technique and you can create stunning tassel earrings with absolutely any beads. No impossible bead matching drama for you. Hello, welcome to The Stylish Maker. My name's Carol. Recently, I shared my 7 favourite statement earrings, and in that episode was my heart tassel earrings. I wondered why I had never made another pair of earrings using that same technique. Then I found the most impossible beads. I say that because I bought them thinking that they had a flat back, when actually they are round. And then once I had them, I discovered that they didn't go with anything in terms of colour. All my pink beads were slightly too blue or too coral, and nothing worked. So finally I took a chance and I ordered some seed beads online, and they really do go. They aren't a perfect match, but by putting the silver bead caps and the silver metal bicones between them, I think these will work. So I'm calling these earrings my impossible beaded tassels, not because they're hard to make, because they are actually pretty simple, just because of the drama along the path to making them. Now you may be thinking, well, if they are impossible beads to match, I don't want to know anything about them. And you're right, of course, but this technique that I'm showing you today is an improved version of the technique that I used to make the heart tassel earrings. And you can use that same technique with absolutely any beads. You don't even need to use a large statement bead like I have. You could use a smaller bead. The trick is that you need a bead cap or cone that will cover the workings of how the tassel is attached. That is the only criteria. Then you can use the same technique to make these beaded earrings of any size. So let's have a look at my impossible beads and what you will need. First, you'll need some kind of statement bead or something smaller, whatever fits your style. I couldn't find exactly the same beads on Amazon, but I have a whole pile of them. So if you want these exact ones, let me know in the comments and we'll sort it out. You will also need some seed beads. These ones are a very straight cut tube, but anything will do. Now I haven't counted my seed beads, but you will need enough to make 16 lines of strung seed beads, 6 centimeters long, or whatever size you want to make for your earrings. If you are using a smaller statement bead, you might want to make a shorter tassel. You'll also need a bead cap. These ones are a 7 centimeter by 5 centimeter, and they are quite domed. A flatter bead cap here won't work. You could also use a bead cone if you wanted the earring to be a little longer. I also used a silver bicone here to mimic the shape of the dome, and also to add a little bit more definition to my earring. But you don't actually need to add this bead if you didn't want to. Lastly, I have used a 3mm silver metal ball on top of my earring to cover the hole because the holes are quite large. Now I used a regular sewing thread, and I know you're going to ask me why I didn't use fireline or some other beading thread. Don't worry, there's a method to my madness. The first time I tried to make these earrings, there were quite a few renditions of these before I got it right. I used a beading thread and the tassels were really quite stiff. There's no pressure or weight on this thread, so it doesn't really have to be strong. So I used regular sewing thread, and this one is just a Gutermann sewing thread. But if you only have beading thread, then use that. The other thing that you will need is some 24 or 26 gauge half hard wire. I used a 24 gauge as that's my go-to for wire wrapped loops, but you could use a 26. Okay, that's all we need to make these earrings, so let's get started. Now in terms of tools, you will also need some needles or a needle. These are color-eye needles, and basically they have a different color on the top of the needle depending on what size, and I'm using a size 10 here, but any needle will do. Now I am going to be using one of my soft velvet beading mats just to hold the beads nice and firm and stop them running away, and I use that when I'm using seed beads and things like that. So here's my beads, and as you can see they are a gorgeous bright pink, but they do not match exactly with my bead, and it probably looks worse on camera than it does, but they will work with the silver between them. I think it works quite nicely. Here's my first earring that I made, and yes, on my screen it looks like a terrible match, but in person they look okay. Now I'm going to be using a white thread so that you can see what I'm doing, but you would use a matching thread, and I've got this one here that I used for the first earring. This one will be restrung once I've done it. You can see it works really well with the beads, so when I have to skip a bead to turn the corner at the bottom, it won't show. You will need a long piece of thread. Basically what you're going to do is go through 8 strands of 6 centimeters twice, plus you need some to tie the knots, etc. So it's probably about 1 meter or 1.20 meters of thread, so it's quite a long piece. I've already threaded my needle, and I'm going to start off by picking up some of my seed beads. I don't usually have it on top of my silicone mat, so it's being a little bouncy and my seed beads want to run away, so I might have to move it. We'll see how we go. So just pick up a few and run them down, and then pick up a few more. I've threaded on 6 centimeters of seed beads. So as you can see here, I've laid it down next to my ruler, and you can see it is almost, well, it's approximately 6 centimeters. I think it's possibly 1 millimeter longer. I don't know, about 6 centimeters. It doesn't have to be exact. And you could change the length of this tassel and make it shorter if you wanted to make a smaller earring. If you were using a smaller bead, it might be quite nice to actually have a smaller tassel. Up to you entirely. Or you could go the other way and make it longer. Okay, so now I've done my first one. What I'm going to do is move the last bead I put on back up to here, and then I'm going to go through these beads. Now you'll notice on this side I've left quite a long tail as well, so that I can tie it off at the end. Now if you miss a bead, it will pop out of the line, so you'll see it pretty quickly. But just check every time you finish picking up a line. Sometimes it can be easier to hold it over your finger like this if you feel like you're having trouble picking up your beads. And just do a few at a time. I just wanted to show you what happens if you miss one. You can see there that that bead is actually popping out of the alignment, so I know that I've missed it. Pull back and put it on. It's very easy to get in a mess, but you can see I've pulled my tail way too long. Just hold on to the end bead that you wrapped the thread around and just pull back, and that will pull this shorter end up until you get it to about probably 8 centimeters or so. And so what you've done is you've looped the thread over the last bead and gone up through the rest. If you don't do that, all your beads will fall off, and you don't want that. So you come down, you move this bead out of the way, and then you go up into that second bead and just up to the top. Now that we've done that, I've realized I haven't done the first bit, so I'm going to just move this for a minute and we'll come back to that. I'm just going to make a bend in the top of my wire, and I'm going to take my round nose pliers, and I want to make a really small loop. So I'm putting the wire right close to the end of the pliers there. I'm going to wrap my wire around and turn my wrist and bring it back around here. And I'm going to pull it nice and tight so that it's a nice small loop. Then I can do this while I've still got it in the jaws there, and I'm going to wrap it around once because I don't want it to be a big wire wrapped loop. So that's what I have now. And then I'm going to cut off the tail, coming in as close as I can with the flush side of my cutters and cutting it. And I'm just going to take my pliers and give that a little squeeze so that the tail goes in. So there's my wire wrapped loop, and as you can see, it is quite small. Now I'm going to move back my beads, trying not to spill my seed beads everywhere. Now I'm going to thread my needle through the loop and take it all the way down to where the beads are. But I'm just going to tie a couple of knots just to secure that onto that loop. As I said, this doesn't have a lot of weight on it, so you don't really need to be too worried about it. That's what that looks like now. You also don't want it to be really, really stiff, so don't pull it too tight. I realised I've got a little loop here, so I'm going to go back through there and hopefully undo that knot. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing again. I'm going to take my seed beads and pick them up. You're just going to pull your seed beads all the way up to the loop until you have this one the same size as your first one. My love Right now I have my second one done, and you can see it is almost the same length. If I was to pull it a little bit, it's possibly one bead too long, but I'm not worried about that because when you're wearing the tassel, it will move around, and if it's one or two beads shorter or longer, it won't matter. So now I'm going to pull the last bead that I put on back down, and I'm going to go through these beads. So, okay, when you get to the bottom, hold your bead or your bottom bead or the last bead you put on and just pull everything up. That's what we have now. I'd like to take a moment to thank the members of the Style Makers Network for sponsoring this video. Over on the Style Makers Network, we do all sorts of cool stuff like live streams and member Zoom calls, and we have a discussion feed so you can ask me anything you want. If you would like to join or have a look and see what it's all about, I'll leave you a link in the description box. So we're going to take our earring and we're going to hold the tassels and the thread out of the way so we can see the loop. Just through the loop like that, pull it up until you have almost closed the loop and put your needle through the loop there, and that will give you a half hitch knot. Make sure that everything is going to stay in place and also so that your thread's facing the right way. Then we're going to repeat again. It's getting too loud in here. It's time to get out. Now I actually have one too many beads on this one, so I'm going to just go back through it with my needle and take it off. So just threading it back through the needle. Now I'm going to hold that one out of the way and go back up through these ones. And just hold the end bead and pull everything up. Not too tight because you don't want it to be stiff. Now we're going to hold the short end of the thread and the wire, and we're going to go back through the loop and pull everything up. Now you don't want to get the thread twisted around your other tassels, so just make sure that you're being careful about that. And we're pulling it up, so there we've got that one knotted on. We're going to repeat that 5 more times, so we have 8 tassels in total. So there's what I have now that I've done my 8 strands of tassels. Now this is a good one to do while you're watching your favorite show, because this takes quite a long time. But it's worth it, I promise. If you're interested in making the jewellery I'm wearing today, I will leave you links in the description box below for my earrings and also for my necklace and for my brooch. This is a brooch I made when I also made some brooches from buttons, so I'll leave you that as well. So now I'm going to take my 2 ends and untangle them. I've taken my needle off and I'm going to just tie them together a couple of times just to make sure that everything's nice and secure. Maybe 3 or 4 times. So there we go, it's all tied up now with its 2 ends tied. Now I'm going to take my 2 ends and I'm going to thread them through a big eye needle. If you haven't seen a big eye needle before, I use these all the time. They basically have a hole that runs the entire length of the needle, like that. And so you can thread on both of your strands there. Now if you don't have a big eye needle, you could use a piece of tiger tail, a little short piece that you've cut and folded in half. Now I want to put my bead cap onto my wire as well as my thread. My wire is longer, so I'm going to pop it onto my wire first. And then I'm going to put my needle through my bead cap as well. And I want to do the same thing with my bicone. So just like that. Now I'm going to thread on my big bead as well. All the ends of the tassel go up through the bead cap and through the bicone and the bead. And now I'm going to pull everything up so that the thread comes out of the top of the bead. I'm actually going to use my pliers because it's being a little bit tricky. Just couldn't get a hold of it there because I didn't pull it through enough. There we go. So that's what I have now. And then I'm going to cut off the threads. So nice and close to the top of the bead. And they'll kind of slip down inside there, but it just gives it that little bit of extra rather than cutting it right at the top of these knots. If you're enjoying this one, remember to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell and give me a thumbs up. And if you are subscribed but you're not seeing my videos, then consider signing up for my newsletter. I'll leave that linked below. Now I'm going to put on my little 3mm ball. That is what I have. And as I said, you don't need this extra bead. I just found that without it, I can see the hole, and I don't like that. I like to have it covered. So there we go. Now we're going to make a wire wrap loop on this end as well. So taking my chain nose pliers, I'm going to put them right at the tip of the plier on top of the bead there. I'm going to make a bend. And the reason I left that tiny space is so that I have something to wrap, or some space for my wraps. Now I'm going to take my round nose pliers, and this time I wanted a bit bigger loop, so I'm going up a little bit further on the jaws and going around, turning my wrist and pulling back around. Now I could put my ear wire in here now, or I can do it later, and I'm actually going to do it later just because I feel like it gives me a better opportunity to get a nice wrap if I do it later. I'm taking my chain nose pliers and I'm holding the loop right where it crosses over there, and I'm going to take my wire and wrap it around twice just to fill that space. So that's what I have now. Then I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to cut that wire off with the flush side of my cutters. Then taking my pliers again, I'm going to just tuck in any tails that are sticking out. So that's what I have now. And then I'm just going to add my ear wire. So taking my ear hook and I'm opening it on the side that opens. So holding it on this side and like that, not like that, because this supports it better so it won't pull it out of shape. Then I'm going to take my thumb and my forefinger and support that earring. Then I'm going to twist my hand down so that my ear wire is now open. Then I'm going to pop on my earring, and then I'm going to hold this on the side, making sure my ball's up there, and just reversing that. And there's my earring. Now let's put them on. There we go, fabulous earrings. Aren't they gorgeous? I love the feel of these tassels when you wear them. They move around and they feel really special. And I think that the colours work well together. They're not an exact match, and I was never going to find an exact match for these. Now you may be thinking about these earrings, oh my gosh, they're really big, they must be heavy. But because these beads are resin and the glass seed beads don't really weigh very much, they aren't very heavy at all. So you can get a big statement earring like this with very little weight, whereas normally if you had a glass bead it would be like weighing my ears down. Like these ones that I had on, these hearts are quite heavy, so I can't actually wear these for a full day, but these ones I think I would have no trouble. So that's something to think about when you're making big statement earrings like this. You want to use resin or plastic beads of some sort so that they're not too heavy. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Remember to hit that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up, and I will talk to you again soon.